Hip Hop Before the Industry, Culture Born from Absence by Mike Aiello. Nelson George explains that hip hop began in communities that had been economically abandoned, especially in the Bronx during the 1970s. What stands out is that hip hop did not emerge from opportunity, but rather emerged from exclusion. Cultural historian Jeff Chang argues that hip hop developed in response to what he calls the demolition of community life in urban neighborhoods after jobs disappeared and public investment declined. Rather than wanting to be included in traditional systems of success, young people created their own structures of identity and expression. Chang suggests hip hop functioned as a way for youth to, quote, build something out of nothing, turning loss into creativity. So from the very beginning, hip hop was less about entertainment and more about adaptation. Scholar George focuses on DJs like Kool Herc, but the deeper impact of DJs was not just musical. DJs organized social life. They created block parties that structured environments where identity could be expressed through performance rather than conflict. Scholar Murray Foreman explains that hip-hop gatherings helped transform neglected urban spaces into meaningful cultural spaces. He argues that these events allowed communities to redefine environments that had been labeled dangerous. In other words, music was not just filling space, it was reshaping how people related to that space. Instead of violence defining status, artistic skill began to do so. One of the most important themes in these chapters is innovation through limitation. Early hip-hop artists lacked access to traditional instruments, but instead of seeing that as a barrier, they reimagined technology. Trisha Rose describes hip-hop's use of turntables as transforming listening devices into creative tools. She explains that this shift blurred the line between consumption and production. Records were no longer just played, they were manipulated, repeated, and reshaped. Rose suggests this reflects a broader cultural innovation, where marginalized communities redefined the purpose of everyday tools. Hip-hop's early techniques were not just musical experiments, but rather they were new ways of thinking about creativity. George presents graffiti as a central part of the early hip-hop culture. Graffiti allowed young people to mark their presence in public spaces. Scholar Bakari Kitwana connects this to a broader search for identity among what he calls the post-civil rights generation. He argues that as formal political movements declined, young people turned toward cultural expression to assert visibility. Graffiti, in this sense, was not simply vandalism, but rather it was a declaration of existence. Instead of waiting for recognition, individuals created visibility on their own terms. Hip-hop culture was about being seen more than it was about being heard. Across chapters 1 and 2, hip-hop appears not just as music, but as a cultural system. Hip-hop created a community where institutions failed, identity where recognition was absent, competition without violence, and creativity without resources. Cheryl Keyes describes hip-hop as a system that includes music, visual arts, performing arts working together. This reinforces George's idea that hip-hop was never only about the sound, but it was about more. It was about constructing meaning in environments where traditional systems had broken down. Understanding this origin helps explain why hip-hop continues to function as a language of identity today. Here are my sources. Thank you for watching and listening to my presentation.